The city of New York buzzed with its usual energy, but today something felt different. The air seemed heavier, charged with tension as people hurried through the streets, their eyes glued to their phones or the nearest TV screens. News outlets blared the same headline over and over again: Karoline Leavitt accused of treason. It was everywhere, on social media feeds, in newspaper stands, and even on giant billboards towering above Times Square. Karoline Leavitt stood inside a quiet dressing room at the Ed Sullivan Theater, where The Late Show with Stephen Colbert was set to begin in less than an hour. She adjusted her navy blue blazer in front of the mirror, trying to steady her hands. Her heart pounded so loudly she could swear everyone around her could hear it. Outside the door, voices buzzed like bees in a hive, reporters shouting questions, while cameras flashed nonstop. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. Just 2 months ago, Karoline had been riding high. As one of the youngest senators elected in recent history, she'd captured the nation's attention with her fiery speeches about equality, education reform, and climate change. People admired her passion, her determination, and her refusal to back down from tough battles. But now, all that goodwill seemed to evaporate overnight. It started with Andrew Carter, a mid-level government analyst no one had ever heard of before this week. On Monday morning, he appeared on national television, claiming he had evidence proving Karoline leaked classified documents to foreign entities during her time as a junior senator. The accusation sent shockwaves through Washington, D.C. and beyond. Reporters swarmed her office demanding answers. Politicians distanced themselves from her publicly, fearing guilt by association. Even some of her closest allies hesitated to defend her outright. Backstage, Rachel Monroe, Karoline's trusted advisor, paced nervously. She glanced at her watch, then at Karoline, who still stared into the mirror. "You've got this," Rachel said firmly, though her voice betrayed a hint of doubt. "Just stick to what we practiced." Karoline nodded slowly but didn't respond. Instead, her mind drifted back to earlier days, the moments that shaped her life long before anyone knew her name. Growing up in rural Ohio, she'd learned early on what it meant to fight for what you believed in. Her father, John Leavitt, had served in the military for decades, instilling in her a sense of duty and discipline. Yet despite his pride in service, he often dismissed her ambitions, telling her politics wasn't a place for someone like her. Too soft, he'd say. Too idealistic. Those words haunted her sometimes, especially now when everything she worked for hung precariously in the balance. Had she been too trusting? Too naive? She shook her head, forcing herself to focus. This wasn't the time for self-doubt. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. A young stagehand poked his head in. "5 minutes, Ms. Leavitt," he said, politely before disappearing again. Karoline took a deep breath and turned to face Rachel. "Let's do this," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. As they walked toward the stage, the noise grew louder. Applause mixed with scattered boos from the audience. Inside the theater, Stephen Colbert greeted the crowd with his trademark wit, easing the tension with jokes about everything from traffic jams to bad coffee. But soon enough, the mood shifted. Colbert leaned forward in his chair, his expression turning serious. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senator Karoline Leavitt." The spotlight hit her as she stepped onto the stage, and for a moment, she felt blinded by its intensity. The audience erupted into a mix of cheers and jeers, the sound echoing in her ears. She smiled faintly, waving briefly before taking her seat across from Colbert. Up close, he looked more human than she remembered, his kind eyes searching hers, perhaps sensing the weight she carried. "Senator Leavitt," Colbert began after a brief introduction, "thank you for joining us tonight. You're here because, well, let's just say your name has been making headlines for all the wrong reasons lately." Karoline nodded, gripping the arms of her chair tightly. "Thank you for having me, Stephen. I know there are a lot of questions out there, and I'm ready to answer them." Colbert wasted no time diving in. "Andrew Carter claims you leaked classified documents to foreign entities. Can you tell us, is any part of that true?" "No," Karoline replied immediately, her voice firm. "Absolutely not. These accusations, are baseless, and I believe they're politically motivated. I've dedicated my career to serving this country, and I would never jeopardize our national security." Her response earned polite applause from parts of the audience, but Colbert pressed on. "Then why does Andrew Carter say otherwise? And why are there discrepancies in your official travel logs?" For the first time, Karoline faltered. She hesitated, her mind racing. The travel logs were indeed problematic. There were gaps she couldn't fully explain, errors made by overworked staff that she hadn't caught until now. "I can assure you those discrepancies are clerical mistakes," she said finally. "Nothing more. I'm cooperating fully with investigators to clear this up." But Colbert wasn't done yet. "So you're saying these allegations have nothing to do with your work on international relations committees? Nothing to do with certain connections abroad?" Karoline felt a chill run down her spine. How much did he know? Or worse, how much did others suspect? She forced herself to maintain eye contact, to project confidence even as doubt gnawed at her insides. "My work has always been transparent," she said carefully. "If anyone wants to scrutinize it, they're welcome to. What they'll find is a commitment to strengthening America, not undermining it." The interview continued, each question probing deeper, each answer requiring more precision. By the end, sweat trickled down Karoline's back, hidden beneath her blazer. As the audience applauded again, she rose to her feet, shaking Colbert's hand before heading backstage. Once out of sight, she slumped against the wall, exhaling sharply. Rachel rushed over, concern etched on her face. "That could have gone worse," she offered tentatively. Karoline gave a weak laugh. "Could have gone better, too." Back in her dressing room, she sank into a chair, her mind swirling with thoughts of what lay ahead. She knew this wouldn't be the last battle she'd face. If anything, it was only the beginning. Somewhere out there, Andrew Carter was watching and waiting. So were countless others eager to see her fall. Yet, amidst the chaos, a spark of defiance ignited within her. They could accuse her, doubt her, try to tear her apart, but they couldn't silence her, not if she refused to let them. With renewed resolve, Karoline straightened her posture and reached for her phone. There was work to be done. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars in the night sky, oblivious to the storm brewing below. The morning after her appearance on The Late Show, Karoline Leavitt woke up to a barrage of notifications on her phone. Social media was ablaze with reactions to her interview. Some praised her composure under pressure, calling her a fighter who deserved the benefit of the doubt. Others were less forgiving, accusing her of dodging questions and hiding behind vague answers. The divide seemed almost impossible to bridge. Karoline sat on the edge of her bed in the hotel suite, scrolling through the comments with a growing sense of unease. She knew public opinion could shift quickly, but this felt different. It wasn't just about defending herself anymore. It was about unraveling a web of lies that had been spun around her. And she didn't have much time. Rachel Monroe walked into the room carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You look like you haven't slept," she said, handing 1 cup to Karoline. "I haven't," Karoline admitted, taking a sip. The bitterness of the coffee matched her mood. "I can't stop thinking about Andrew Carter. Why would he do this? What does he think he knows?" Rachel hesitated before answering. "Maybe he doesn't know anything. Maybe he's being used." Karoline frowned. "Used by whom?" "That's what we need to find out," Rachel replied. "But first we need someone who can dig deeper than the reporters or investigators. Someone discreet." Karoline nodded slowly. She trusted Rachel's judgment, but they needed results fast. That's when Rachel suggested Ethan Brooks, a former investigative journalist turned private investigator known for his knack for uncovering secrets others wanted buried. By noon, Karoline and Rachel met Ethan at a quiet cafe tucked away in a corner of Manhattan. He was younger than Karoline expected, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a calm demeanor that put people at ease. After introductions, they got straight to business. "I don't have time to beat around the bush," Karoline said. "Someone is trying to destroy me and I need to know why." Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her carefully. Tell me everything you know so far. Every detail matters. For the next hour, Karoline recounted the events leading up to the accusations. She described Andrew Carter's sudden emergence, the discrepancies in her travel logs, and the relentless media scrutiny. Ethan listened intently, jotting down notes in a small notebook. When she finished, Ethan tapped his pen against the table thoughtfully. If these documents are real, and I'm not saying they are, then whoever leaked them must have had access to high-level information. This isn't something an analyst like Carter could pull off alone. Exactly, Rachel chimed in, which means there's someone else pulling the strings. Ethan nodded. My guess is that Carter's either lying or being manipulated. Either way, we start with him. Later that evening, Andrew Carter sat alone in his apartment, staring blankly at the television screen. The news channels were still talking about him, dissecting every word he'd said during his explosive interview days earlier. At first, he'd felt a rush of satisfaction, believing he was doing the right thing by exposing corruption. But now, doubt crept in. His phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was another anonymous message, this one more threatening than the last. Back off, or you'll regret it. Andrew stared at the text, his hands trembling slightly. He deleted it without responding, but the fear lingered. In the kitchen, Laura, his wife, prepared dinner, though neither of them had much appetite. She glanced over her shoulder at him. You should call your lawyer again, she said softly, or maybe go to the police. Andrew shook his head. It's too late for that. If I back down now, they'll bury me anyway. They? Laura asked, setting down the knife she'd been using to chop vegetables. Who are they, Andrew? You're acting like you're in some kind of spy movie. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't know who they are, but I know I stumbled onto something big, something dangerous. Laura crossed the room and knelt beside him. Please, Andrew, think about us. For once. We have a life here, a family. Is this worth risking everything for? Andrew looked at her, guilt washing over him. She was right, of course. He'd dragged her into this mess without even asking how she felt about it. Yet, deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that backing down would make him complicit in whatever shady dealings he'd uncovered. I'll figure something out, he promised, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. Unbeknownst to Andrew, someone was watching. Daniel Graves, a lean man in his late 30s with piercing gray eyes, stood outside the building across the street, binoculars raised to his face. He'd been tailing Andrew since the accusations went public, waiting for the right moment to act. His employer, a shadowy organization known only as Project Horizon, had given him clear instructions. Silence Andrew Carter permanently. But Daniel wasn't so sure anymore. Over the years, he'd carried out countless assignments without question, convinced he was serving a greater purpose. This time, however, something felt off. The documents Andrew claimed to possess weren't just random leaks. They pointed to a pattern of deception reaching the highest levels of government. Was he really supposed to eliminate the one person brave enough to expose it? As night fell, Daniel slipped into the shadows, blending seamlessly with the darkness. For now, he would wait. But deep inside, he wrestled with a decision that could change everything. Meanwhile, Karoline and Ethan began piecing together clues. Using his connections, Ethan accessed classified databases and cross-referenced names mentioned in Andrew's original testimony. One name kept popping up. Samantha Wells, a former intelligence operative rumored to have ties to Project Horizon. She's our best shot, Ethan told Karoline during their second meeting. If anyone knows what's going on, it's her. Can we trust her? Karoline asked. Ethan shrugged. Not completely, but desperate times call for desperate measures. They arranged to meet Samantha at a secluded park early the next morning. When she arrived, she looked nothing like the hardened operative Ethan had described. Her blonde hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, and her casual jeans and hoodie made her blend in with any other jogger passing by. You're taking a big risk coming here, Samantha said, glancing around nervously. If anyone finds out I talked to you... We wouldn't ask if it wasn't important, Karoline interrupted. What do you know about Project Horizon? Samantha hesitated, weighing her options. Finally, she spoke. Project Horizon isn't just one operation, it's a network. They manipulate data, plant false evidence, and orchestrate scandals to control outcomes. If Andrew Carter has documents implicating you, chances are they came from them. Karoline's stomach churned. So they framed me? It's possible, Samantha admitted. But proving it won't be easy. They cover their tracks better than anyone. Before they could press further, Samantha glanced at her watch. I've said too much already. Be careful, Senator. These people don't play fair. With that, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Back at the hotel, Karoline replayed the conversation in her mind. The pieces were starting to come together, but the bigger picture remained elusive. Whoever was behind this had resources, influence, and no qualms about ruining lives. She realized then that clearing her name wouldn't just require evidence. It would demand courage, resilience, and allies willing to stand by her side. As she stared out the window at the city skyline, Karoline felt a surge of determination. She might be outnumbered, but she wasn't powerless, not yet. The next morning, Karoline Leavitt woke up earlier than usual. She stared at the ceiling for a few minutes, replaying Samantha Wells' words in her mind. Project Horizon isn't just one operation, it's a network. The phrase echoed, like a warning. The more she thought about it, the clearer it became that this wasn't just about her anymore. If Project Horizon was as powerful and secretive as Samantha claimed, then exposing them would be her only way out. Rachel Monroe arrived with fresh coffee and a stack of papers filled with notes from their previous meetings. We need to move. Fast, Rachel said, setting the papers on the table. Every day we wait gives them more time to bury the truth. Karoline nodded. Samantha mentioned something about false evidence. What if Andrew Carter's documents are part of that? A setup to make me look guilty? It's possible, Rachel replied, but we still need proof. Without hard evidence, no one will believe us. Ethan Brooks joined them shortly after, carrying a laptop under his arm. He had spent the night digging deeper into Project Horizon, cross-referencing names and tracing connections. I found a pattern, he announced, opening the laptop. Several high-ranking officials have ties to companies linked to Project Horizon. One name keeps coming up, Senator Richard Hayes. Karoline frowned. Hayes? He's been my opponent for years. Why would he involve himself in something like this? Maybe because he wants you out of the picture, Ethan suggested. If they can discredit you, they weaken your influence and strengthen his. The pieces were starting to fit together, but they needed more. Samantha had given them a lead, but it was vague at best. They decided their next step would be to track down someone who could confirm Project Horizon's existence, or better yet, expose its inner workings. Andrew Carter, meanwhile, felt the walls closing in. After another sleepless night, he stepped outside his apartment to grab groceries. The streets of Washington, D.C. seemed quieter than usual, almost eerily so. As he walked, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being followed. Every car that passed, every pedestrian glancing his way, it all felt suspicious. When he returned home, Laura greeted him with a worried expression. You're pale, she said. Are you okay? I'm fine, Andrew lied, though his hands trembled as he set the grocery bags on the counter. Just tired. Laura didn't push further. Instead, she handed him a letter that had arrived earlier. It was unsigned, written in block letters. Meet me tonight at 8 p.m., corner of 5th and Main. Come alone. Andrew stared at the note, his heart racing. Who sent this? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Someone connected to the scandal. You're not going, Laura said firmly. It's too dangerous. I don't have a choice, Andrew replied. This could be my only chance to clear things up. Laura sighed, tears welling in her eyes. Then let me come with you, please. Andrew hesitated but eventually agreed. He couldn't face whatever awaited him completely alone. That evening, Andrew and Laura arrived at the designated corner. The area was dimly lit with only a few streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. They waited nervously, scanning the surroundings for any sign of movement. Finally, A figure emerged from the darkness, a man wearing a hooded sweatshirt. "Andrew Carter?" the man asked, his voice low and cautious. "Yes," Andrew replied. "Who are you?" "My name is Daniel Graves," the man said. "I work for the people behind this mess, but I'm here to help you." Andrew exchanged a glance with Laura, unsure whether to trust him. "Why should I believe you?" "Because I know what they're planning," Daniel said. "They want you silenced, permanently. And if you don't listen to me, you won't live to see tomorrow." Laura gripped Andrew's arm tightly. "What do you mean silenced?" she demanded. Daniel ignored her question and focused on Andrew. "You stumbled onto something bigger than you realize. Those documents you leaked? They're fake, planted by Project Horizon to frame Senator Leavitt." Andrew's eyes widened. "Fake? But how?" "They manipulated the data," Daniel explained. "Made it look real enough to fool anyone who saw it, including you." Andrew felt sick. All this time he'd believed he was doing the right thing, exposing corruption. Instead, he'd been used as a pawn in someone else's game. "What do I do?" Andrew asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "For now, lay low," Daniel advised. "Don't contact anyone. Not the media, not your lawyer. Just disappear for a while. I'll try to gather evidence to prove everything." Before Andrew could respond, headlights appeared in the distance. A black SUV sped toward them, screeching to a halt. Two men jumped out, their faces obscured by masks. "Run!" Daniel shouted, shoving Andrew and Laura toward an alleyway. Couple sprinted as fast as they could, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. Behind them, they heard shouts and footsteps closing in. Daniel stayed behind, drawing the pursuers away. Bullets whizzed past, ricocheting off walls and shattering windows. Somehow Andrew and Laura managed to slip into a narrow side street, losing their pursuers in the maze of alleys. When they finally stopped to catch their breath, Andrew turned to Laura. "We have to leave town," he said. "Now." Laura nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Okay, let's go." Back in New York, Karoline and Ethan continued their investigation. Using the information Samantha provided, they identified several key players within Project Horizon. One name stood out: Senator Richard Hayes. According to Ethan's research, Hayes had attended secret meetings with executives from companies tied to the organization. "We need to confront him," Karoline said. "Publicly. Force him to admit what he knows." "It's risky," Ethan warned. "If he denies everything, it could backfire." "I don't care," Karoline replied. "If he's involved, I'll drag him into the light, even if it costs me everything." The opportunity came sooner than expected. Stephen Colbert invited Karoline back onto his show, along with Senator Hayes, for a special segment addressing the ongoing controversy. Both agreed to appear unaware of each other's intentions. On the night of the taping, the atmosphere in the studio was electric. The audience buzzed with anticipation as Colbert introduced the guests. "Tonight we have two very important figures here to discuss the allegations surrounding Senator Karoline Leavitt. Please welcome Senator Leavitt and Senator Richard Hayes." As the two politicians shook hands for the cameras, the tension between them was palpable. Colbert dove straight into the topic, asking Hayes about his stance on the accusations against Karoline. "Senator Leavitt has denied the claims," Colbert said. "Do you believe her?" Hayes smirked, leaning back in his chair. "I think the evidence speaks for itself. If she's innocent, she has nothing to worry about." Karoline leaned forward, her eyes locked on Hayes. "Funny you should mention evidence, Senator, because I've been looking into some interesting connections myself. For example, your recent meetings with certain corporate executives. Care to explain those?" Hayes froze, caught off guard. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Oh, I think you do," Karoline pressed. "Executives from companies linked to Project Horizon. Ring any bells?" The audience murmured, sensing the shift in power dynamics. Hayes tried to recover, sputtering denials, but Karoline didn't let up. She presented screenshots of emails and meeting schedules Ethan had uncovered, painting a damning picture of Hayes' involvement. Colbert watched the exchange unfold, visibly stunned. "Senator Hayes, do you have a response to these allegations?" Hayes stammered, his composure crumbling. "This is ridiculous. These are baseless accusations." But the damage was done. The audience erupted in applause, many chanting Karoline's name. On social media, the hashtag #DocuExposeHorizon began trending as viewers shared clips of the heated confrontation. Later that night, Karoline sat alone in her hotel room, replaying the interview in her mind. For the first time since the scandal broke, she felt a glimmer of hope. Hayes's reaction had confirmed what she suspected all along. Project Horizon was real, and they were desperate to keep their secrets hidden. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "We're getting closer. Keep pushing." Karoline smiled faintly. Whatever battles lay ahead, she was ready. The days that followed the explosive interview on The Late Show were a whirlwind for Karoline Leavitt. The confrontation with Senator Richard Hayes had shifted public opinion in her favor, but it also made enemies out of powerful people who preferred to stay hidden. Every step forward seemed to come with a new challenge, and the stakes grew higher with each passing hour. Karoline spent most of her time working closely with Ethan Brooks, piecing together more evidence about Project Horizon. They holed up in a small office Ethan rented under a false name, poring over documents, emails, and financial records. The deeper they dug, the clearer it became that Project Horizon wasn't just some rogue operation. It was a vast network, embedded within the highest levels of government and corporate power. One afternoon, while analyzing data on his laptop, Ethan let out a low whistle. "Look at this," he said, turning the screen toward Karoline. It was a list of transactions between shell companies linked to Project Horizon and foreign governments. "This is how they fund their operations. Money laundering on a massive scale." Karoline leaned closer, her brow furrowed. "So they're not just manipulating information, they're profiting from it too." "Exactly," Ethan replied. "And if we can trace these transactions back to specific individuals, we might have enough to take them down." But tracing the money wasn't easy. The trail was deliberately obscured, leading through multiple countries and accounts designed to confuse anyone trying to follow it. Still, Ethan was determined. He reached out to contacts in cybersecurity and forensic accounting, enlisting their help to untangle the web. Meanwhile, Andrew Carter and his wife Laura lived in constant fear. After narrowly escaping the men sent to silence them, they fled Washington, D.C., leaving behind everything they owned. They drove for hours, finally stopping at a cheap motel in a small town far from home. For days, they stayed indoors, barely speaking, jumping at every sound outside their door. Andrew knew they couldn't hide forever. Sooner or later, Daniel Graves would find them, or worse, those pursuing him would catch up. He tried calling Daniel several times, but the number went straight to voicemail. Desperate for answers, Andrew decided to leave a message. "Daniel, it's me," he whispered into the phone. "We're safe for now, but we can't keep running. Please, tell us what to do next." Hours passed without a response. Just when Andrew began to lose hope, his phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Meet me tomorrow, same place as before. Midnight." Andrew showed the message to Laura. She looked skeptical but nodded. "We don't have much choice," she said quietly. That night, Andrew returned to the corner of 5th and Main, his heart pounding. Laura waited in the car nearby, ready to drive away at a moment's notice. As the clock struck midnight, Daniel Graves appeared from the shadows, looking even more exhausted than before. "You shouldn't be here," Daniel said immediately. "It's not safe." "I don't care," Andrew shot back. "I need to know what's going on. Why are they after me? What does Project Horizon want?" Daniel hesitated, then sighed. "They're cleaning house. Anyone who knows too much or could expose them is being eliminated. That includes you." "But why frame Senator Leavitt?" Andrew asked. "What's the point?" "It's all about control," Daniel explained. "By discrediting her, they weaken trust in the system. People stop believing in leaders and institutions." Chaos creates opportunities for groups like Project Horizon to step in and shape the narrative. Andrew shook his head, overwhelmed. How do we stop them? We gather proof, Daniel said. Enough to blow the lid off this whole operation. And we get it to someone who can use it. Before Andrew could respond, headlights illuminated the street. A black SUV sped toward them, screeching to a halt just feet away. Armed men jumped out, aiming guns directly at Daniel and Andrew. Run! Daniel shouted, shoving Andrew toward the alleyway. Gunfire erupted, echoing through the empty streets. Andrew sprinted as fast as he could, adrenaline masking the pain in his legs. Behind him, he heard shouts and the sound of bullets ricocheting off walls. He didn't look back. He couldn't afford to. When he finally reached the car, Laura was already revving the engine. Go, 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 he yelled, throwing himself into the passenger seat. She slammed on the gas, tires squealing as they sped away. In the rearview mirror, Andrew saw Daniel standing alone in the middle of the street, surrounded by armed men. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Then Daniel turned and ran in the opposite direction, disappearing into the darkness. Back in New York, Karoline received an anonymous email late one evening. Attached was a file labeled Project Horizon Evidence. Her hands trembled as she opened it, revealing a trove of classified documents, financial records, and internal communications. Among them was a memo detailing plans to discredit her, a blueprint for the scandal that had nearly destroyed her career. She called Ethan immediately. We've got it, she said, her voice shaking with a mix of relief and disbelief. Proof. Everything we need to expose them. Ethan arrived within minutes, and together they sifted through the files. One document stood out, a signed agreement between Project Horizon and several high-ranking officials, including Senator Richard Hayes. It outlined their roles in orchestrating disinformation campaigns and manipulating political outcomes. This is it, Ethan said, his tone serious. If we release this, it'll blow everything wide open. But it's risky, Karoline replied. They'll fight back hard. They already are, Ethan reminded her. We don't have a choice anymore. The next morning, Karoline held a press conference outside her campaign headquarters. Reporters crowded around, eager for updates. Standing behind a podium adorned with the American flag, Karoline took a deep breath and began. Over the past few weeks, my integrity and patriotism have been called into question, she said, her voice steady. Today, I'm here to present evidence proving that these accusations are part of a larger conspiracy orchestrated by a shadowy organization known as Project Horizon. As she spoke, images of the documents flashed on a large screen behind her. The room fell silent as reporters scrambled to capture every detail. When she finished, the crowd erupted into chaos, questions flying from every direction. Senator Richard Hayes issued a statement denying any involvement, but his words rang hollow. Within hours, calls for congressional hearings grew louder, and pressure mounted on lawmakers to investigate Project Horizon. That evening, Karoline sat in her hotel room, staring at the city lights beyond her window. Exhaustion washed over her, but she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in years. For the first time, she believed they might actually win. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. You did it. Now finish the job. Karoline smiled faintly. The battle wasn't over yet, but for the first time she could see a path forward. The weeks that followed Karoline Leavitt's press conference were a blur of activity. The evidence she released sent shockwaves through Washington, D.C. and beyond. Lawmakers scrambled to distance themselves from Project Horizon, while investigative journalists worked tirelessly to uncover more details about the secretive organization. For the first time in months, Karoline felt like she had the upper hand, but the victory wasn't without its costs. Threats poured in daily, anonymous messages warning her to back down or face consequences. Her security detail doubled, and Rachel Monroe insisted she avoid public appearances unless absolutely necessary. Despite the danger, Karoline refused to retreat. She knew this was the moment she'd been fighting for, and she wasn't about to let fear stop her. Congressional hearings began shortly after the scandal broke. Senator Richard Hayes was called to testify under oath, his demeanor shifting from confident to defensive as lawmakers grilled him about his ties to Project Horizon. Documents leaked by Karoline painted a damning picture, leaving Hayes with few options but to admit partial involvement. His resignation came days later, sending ripples through the political world. As Project Horizon unraveled, attention turned to Andrew Carter. Reporters tracked him down to a small motel where he and Laura had been hiding. At first, Andrew resisted speaking publicly, fearing retaliation. But when Karoline reached out personally, promising protection, he agreed to share his story. Andrew appeared on national television alongside Karoline, recounting how he'd been manipulated into accusing her. He described the anonymous threats he received and the night he narrowly escaped capture. His testimony humanized the scandal, turning public opinion even further in Karoline's favor. "What happened to me shows just how dangerous these groups are," Andrew said during the interview. "They'll do anything to protect their secrets, even destroy innocent lives." Karoline nodded in agreement. "This isn't just about me or Andrew. It's about holding people accountable and ensuring no one else has to go through what we did." Behind the scenes, Daniel Graves played a crucial role in dismantling Project Horizon. After helping Andrew escape, he went underground, using his skills to gather additional evidence against the organization. He sent encrypted files to Karoline and Ethan, each containing new pieces of the puzzle. Together, they built an irrefutable case exposing the full scope of Project Horizon's activities. One evening, as Daniel sat alone in a safe house, he received a call from Karoline. "Thank you," she said simply. "We couldn't have done this without you." Daniel hesitated before responding. "I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because someone needed to." His words stayed with Karoline long after the call ended. She realized then that the fight against corruption wasn't hers alone. It was shared by countless others who risked everything to stand up for what was right. As the dust settled, Karoline decided it was time to return home. She hadn't seen her father, John Leavitt, since the scandal began, and she knew avoiding him any longer would only deepen the rift between them. Driving through the rolling fields of rural Ohio brought back memories of her childhood. The summers spent playing outside, the arguments over dinner about politics and duty. When she arrived at her father's house, he greeted her with a mix of surprise and skepticism. They sat together in the living room, the silence heavy between them. Finally, John spoke. "You've caused quite a stir." "I know," Karoline replied. "But I had to fight for the truth. Wouldn't you have done the same?" John sighed, rubbing his temples. "Maybe. But I always thought you were too soft for this kind of battle. Too trusting, and maybe I proved you wrong." Karoline said gently, "I'm not perfect, Dad. I make mistakes. But I won't let anyone tell me I can't lead, or that I don't belong here." For the first time in years, John smiled. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. "You've got guts, kid. I'll give you that." They talked late into the night, bridging gaps that had formed over decades. By the time Karoline left the next morning, she felt lighter, as if a weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying had finally lifted. Back in New York, life began returning to normal, or as close to normal as possible. Rachel organized a small celebration for Karoline's team, complete with pizza and champagne. As they toasted to their hard-fought victory, Karoline reflected on how far they'd come. "We couldn't have done this alone," she said, raising her glass. "Every single one of you played a part, thank you." Ethan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "This isn't the end, though. There will always be people like Project Horizon trying to manipulate the system. We need to stay vigilant." Karoline agreed. "And we will. This is just the beginning." In the months that followed, Karoline threw herself into rebuilding trust, not just in herself, but in the institutions she believed in. She introduced legislation aimed at increasing transparency in government operations, and worked tirelessly to ensure whistleblowers like Andrew Carter were protected rather than punished. Andrew, for his part, moved on from the chaos of the past year. With Laura by his side, he started a new job at a nonprofit organization focused on government accountability. Though scars remained, he found solace in knowing he'd made a difference. Daniel Graves disappeared from the public eye entirely, leaving behind only rumors of his involvement in exposing Project Horizon. Some speculated he'd gone overseas. Others believed he was preparing for his next mission. Wherever he was, Karoline hoped he found peace. On a crisp autumn evening, Karoline stood on the balcony of her apartment, gazing at the city skyline. Lights twinkled like stars, a reminder of the resilience and hope that defined humanity. She thought about all she'd endured, the accusations, the threats, the sleepless nights, and realized something profound. None of it had broken her. Instead, it had made her stronger. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Tomorrow's another day." Karoline smiled, tucking the phone back into her pocket. Tomorrow was indeed another day, a chance to keep fighting, to keep building a better future, and she was ready.